Hi, welcome to the video. My name's Dychronic, and today I want to talk about my top 10 PvE supers in Destiny 2. More specifically, the best supers for both single boss damage and of course ad clearing in a top 10 list. And on top of that, I have made a spreadsheet for this video, which not only includes all of those different supers listed with their exotic combinations, but also DPS calculations, so you can very clearly see which supers are doing the most output. And if you wanted to get your hands on that particular spreadsheet, you can find that over at my Discord server, link in the description down below, on the channel #spreadsheets and docs. If you don't see that channel, you just have to verify with the bot. And of course, spreadsheets like this really would not be possible without my patrons on Patreon, especially this one where I decided to add a new thing, which caused me a lot of drama and math to do, but is such a cool addition that I can't wait to share with you in this video. And things like this wouldn't be possible, especially at the end of the season where not a lot of people are playing, that really support me and allow me to continue making this stuff for you. So if you want to see them continue, check out a link in the description down below. Moving on, this video is going to be split into 3 major parts. In the first part, I'm going to do a little bit of a quick overview of the spreadsheet and those extra changes that I mentioned before. In the second part, we're going to go through the top 10, which again is not based solely on DPS output, but a lot of different factors. And the last part, I wanted to take a deep dive deeper into the numbers of those changes and why it's so impressive and interesting. This is the part where if you really like Destiny and you are a mega nerd, you're gonna love it. That's me. I am the mega nerd too. Right, so moving on, let's go and get into that first part. This is my spreadsheet. All of its dark theme, color-coded pictures, and DPS calculations for all the different supers and different combinations that will affect this super's duration, damage output, DPS, etc. And if you saw my supers countdown from last season, you know everything to the left of column Q is pretty standard with the additions and changes with Void 3.0. Now, everything to the right of column Q, now that is where things get spicy. So this section seeks to answer one main question that I almost guarantee you've probably asked yourself at some point while playing Destiny 2. Is a specific super worth using before using your heavy and your special weapons in a specific boss phase? So for example, a Garden of Salvation boss phase is around 15 seconds. Rogue is around 35 seconds. Both of them have different advantages to their length. So is a specific super worth using before specifically Gjallarhorn and then Cartesian Coordinate with Vorpal? I chose these two because they're some of the higher performing options that have a decent range potential. And if you look on the spreadsheet, anything with a green cell is worth using before Gjallarhorn and Cartesian Coordinate within that length of time. And furthermore, I also have a solo play or a team play side of things. So for example, if you use a tether, you get a damage buff for your Gjallarhorn and Cartesian, and that actually makes a difference. And for the team play side of things, I assume you have a Well of Radiance plus a divinity or a tether on the target, which is about 50%. Technically, Ursa's is better. It's a 35% over a 25% buff of Well of Radiance, but this is the most common scenario and a good base mark. Moving on to the second section, let's go ahead and get into the top 10. First up, for number 10, we have the Dawn Blade with the Bottom Tree and Dawn Chorus. Now, this is one of probably the most underrated subclass and exotic combinations in the game, but Dawn Chorus can make your Dawn Blade do up to 3 times the damage, and this actually applies based on the number of burn effects on the target, which can be triggered by other burn effects from things like Polaris Lance or your melee attack or your grenade attack or other Dawn Blade Warlocks. Yes, that's right. If you have 5 Dawn Blade Warlocks in a team, you get that burn effect up to ×8 almost immediately, and you start doing insane amounts of damage. And it's also quite quick as well. And furthermore, Bottom Tree also has the ability to last longer as you're getting kills with it. So you have single target damage options at range, and you also have ad clearing at range as well. So definitely don't overlook it. After that, at number 9, we have the Hunter Stasis super, Silence and Squall, with and without Star Eater scales. If you don't know, you'll see Star Eaters multiple times. Star Eaters can give you up to 70% more damage getting 8 orbs before using your super, which obviously is inconsistent because you're not always going to be able to get 8 orbs, especially after they remove Masterwork orbs. That being said, either one of these is actually worth using because of the crowd control capabilities of the Ice Tornado itself to basically tell all the enemies to stop moving, to make it so that they all take damage over time, which is actually decent DPS, and it lasts for a good amount of time as well, allowing you to just hold an enemy in one spot and shoot them as much as you want. On top of obviously having the Stasis subclass and freezing capabilities and shatter diving grenades is always really nice. Following that at number 8 is going to be the Sentinel Shield with Doomfang Pauldrons. Probably one of the more underrated exotic and super combinations in the game, but it's probably one of the most fun. And I say that objectively because is so much fun. So firstly, Sentinel Shield by itself is actually a really good super. It has a good melee option with a melee combination with more damage. It has a ranged option in the form of Sentinel Shield, allowing you to bounce off a bunch of enemies and have that controlled demolition explosions, and you have ability to defend yourself if you want to run away from enemies, and it always now is going to be a banner shield, allowing your enemy or your teammates to stand behind you and shoot through it for the highest amount of damage, 35%, and also last longer while you're defending them and spawning orbs while you're blocking damage. So many different options that are amazing by itself. Slap on Doomfang Pauldrons, and all of a sudden it lasts around 50% longer, because any shield hit you have increases the duration of the super, and any melee kill gives you a shield back, allowing you to get this cycle going for a lot longer lasting super. Now technically it's not as infinite as it was before last season, but there are a number of artifacts that can help this along as well. Following that, at number 7, we have the Arcstaff Top Tree with either Radiant Flux or Star Eater Scales. Star Eater Scales having a higher upper bound because 70% more DPS is very high. Again, a little bit more inconsistent, so there are a lot of times which you might prefer using Radiant Flux, which usually makes it last twice as long as you're getting hits on the enemy. And furthermore, when you're using Arcstaff, you want to go for the light, heavy attack, which is, if you don't know, there's a lot of different combinations of attacks for this super that most people don't know about. Light, heavy is usually the most consistent damage output. And lastly, technically, I usually use bottom tree over top tree. Top tree, if you dodge, you get lethal sparks, giving you a little bit more damage, but bottom tree, you dodge and you can survive a lot more damage. So I do prefer that, but top tree has the higher amount of damage. Following that, at number 6, we have the Well of Radiance, which should come as no surprise. You've probably seen it in Grandmaster Nightfalls, you've seen it in seasonal activities, you've seen it in raids. This is being used all over the place, not only for Lunafaction, but for Phoenix Protocol, for the damage bonus, and of course the nearly I never die healing from the actual well itself. This is an incredible support super that is almost always seen in almost every raid, and a lot of Grandmasters as well. Following that, at number 5, we have the Nova Bomb for Vortex and Cataclysm. Specifically, Cataclysm has a higher upper bound by very slight margins that Vortex, in my opinion, just ends up doing more consistently, because again, you're not blocking shots with the Cataclysm, which is so annoying. And not only that, you don't need an exotic while you're using it. You could probably use something like Dharam Kara if you really like the super, but that's not as necessary. And furthermore, there's a lot of really great Void exotics with Void 3.0, like Controverse Hold, Ezrex Sin, Verity's Brow, even just for the grenade bonuses that do incredibly well. So an amazing super that doesn't need an exotic, doesn't even have an exotic option that increases super damage, and you have the rest of it with an incredible neutral game. After that, at number 4, we have the Tether Mobius Quiver with Star Eater Scales. Again, Star Eater Scales, a little inconsistent, getting you 70% more damage with it, which, by the way, the Mobius Quiver Tether is now used pretty highly in the DPS combinations these days, and Star Eaters just brings it up to such a high level that it's even higher output than that of Falling Star. But again, you do have to get 8 orbs before you can use it, but it also obviously weakens the target, which may be more useful. It depends. To be honest, there's not much to say about this. The Mobius Quiver super, obviously very damaging. The subclass is amazing too, and Starter Scales just makes it a lot more. Following that, at number 3 is going to be the Titan Stasis super known as Glacial Quake, and specifically without any other exotics, because there's nothing else that affects the super damage. It used to be last season that Synthoceps helped it, 50% more damage while surrounded, but there's a reason why they stopped that, because this super is insane by itself. If you don't know how this works, if you use your heavy attack, you can spawn 6 stasis crystals in front of you around 5 to 10 meters away. If you position that or space yourself out so that's right around a boss target, you can break and hit almost every one of these stasis crystals with maximum damage. Now here's the thing, what is maximum damage? From my calculations, each one of these stasis crystals, which breaks off into like 4 or 5 different numbers, does around 35,000 damage to Karo. There's 6 stasis crystals, so that's 210,000 damage as a maximum. On average, you're probably gonna get anywhere from 100,000 to 200,000. It's very inconsistent based on the distance to the target and the number of crystals that end up spawning. Its DPS is at 86,000. Galahorn's DPS is around 77,000. So a single heavy attack with this particular super and then sliding through it or having Witherhorn on the ground to break it for you is better than Galahorn. What? And not only that, its total ammo damage is 1.1 million, or regularly, on average, around 1 million, which, if you didn't know, you scroll down to the bottom, 1 million is not that common for super damage. It's only like Arcstaff down here and then Glacial Quake or Dawnblade, right? That's a lot of freaking damage. Also should keep in mind the number of roaming supers up here in the top 10. We have the Dawn Chorus stuff, we have the Arc Staff with Star Eaters, and then there's just Glacial Quake by itself. That should tell you how amazing this super is, on top of being an AoE burst that hits every enemy on the battlefield when they're in it, basically killing everything, and doing boss damage at the same time, and creating stasis crystals, and creating all those stasis benefits. And I use Inmost Light while I use it, so I have tons of grenades too. It's way too much fun. You should definitely use it. Following that at number 2, we have the Tether Mobius Quiver with Orpheus Rigs. Technically a lower upper bound than that of starter scales with Mobius Quiver, however, a bit more consistent. Orpheus Rig increases the number of shots by 1, so instead of shooting 2 shots, you shoot 3 shots, which actually increases it by a bit amount, because the first shot hits with normal damage and weakens the target. The second shot hits the target with more damage because it's weakened, and the third shot does as well. So a third shot has increased more value. And furthermore, it's very consistent. You can always use an Orpheus Rigs, no matter how many orbs you're picking up, like with Star Eaters, and it's always gonna output damage. And sometimes it's just nice to have an extra shot to put around the battlefield. To be honest, there's not much more to say about it. Orpheus Rig is probably one of the best hunter options to use when it comes to damage phases. Almost always. There's a couple things here we'll talk in the third part that are very interesting. And finally, at number 1, it should come as no surprise, we have the Falling Star Missile Titan. The Falling Star Missile Titan happens so quickly, 2.7 seconds, and outputs an insane amount of damage because it does double the damage of a regular missile hit. Fun fact, by the way, a Missile Titan without Falling Star is still technically worth using in a DPS phase if you don't have Falling Star. Compared to all the other Titan options, it's literally the second best option. And furthermore, the subclass for Falling Star and Missile is actually good too. Inertial Override gives you more damage from the ammo. You also got Ballistic Slam to give you more supers. There's a lot of great stuff, and Falling Star Missile is just the meta. And with that out of the way, let's move on to the third section. This is gonna be for the mega nerds, and we're gonna go ahead and take a look a little bit deeper on how all this math works and why I think it's just so exciting. First of all, just so you have an idea of how complicated this was, this is the math that it took to calculate DPS of using a super for a certain amount of time, then Gjallarhorn for a certain amount of time, and then Cartesian in the maximum possible output for 15 seconds and 35 seconds. And yes, you see a double nested if statement with a lot of parentheses that were really complicated to get done. And in hindsight, I realized there was an easier way to do it, but this was the way that I did it. And furthermore, that there's 2 sections here for solo play and team play. In solo play, using certain supers for a weaken effect, like with Tether, or a certain weapon damage effect, like with Bubble and Well of Radiance, actually mattered a lot, and did actually change different outputs, versus in team play, where you can just expect to have a buff, and whether or not using your super, like a Missile Titan or a Glacial Quake, was worth it if your team has put down all the buffs that you could possibly want. And this distinction was very important because both apply. Even if you're playing on a team in a Grandmaster Nightfall, there's going to be instances where you're the only buff that we get, and you using Tether is going to make a difference. Now, this obviously doesn't take in consideration a lot of the other things like Wither Horde and Anarchy combos, Izanagi's, which obviously takes huge benefit to having a Divinity on the target, the combination of different teammates, maybe one with Wall of Radiance and Divinity, another one with Ursa Titan. There's so many different combinations of stuff, so many little glitches as well, like putting Wither Horde on a target, now taking spec works on them. There's tons of little things. This, I just wanted to give you a baseline on whether things are worth using. And again, if you're the 3 classes, use one of these 3 main options and it's well and above probably the best option anyways. Furthermore, there's a couple of very interesting things I wanted to talk about in this video that I learned from this data, kind of like an analysis. First of all, Chaos Reach, even with Geomag stabilizers, is apparently almost never worth using, and that comes as a surprise because it was considered a DPS option for a very long time. Obviously you don't see it that often, but the reason why is very clear. Another interesting thing is that Nighthawk is almost always going to be the best option when it comes to sharpshooter damage. Even if you're using the 3-shot combo with starter scales, which starter scales increases the damage by 70%, Nighthawk essentially doubling the damage output of those 3 shots into 1 shot, and sharpshooter technically increasing the damage per shot as you're getting headshots, which I thought would bring it over the amount for Celestial, but it doesn't. So Nighthawk is just the better option. Another interesting fact is that Blade Barrage is still a really good DPS option, especially if you have infinite Blade Barrage with like Galanor on Atheon, especially if you can get starter scales, orbs going. But Tether Mobius is just so high and above all of that. Even Orpheus Rig Tether that it doesn't seem worth it to use Blade Barrage, and hopefully Solar 3.0 makes a mix in the meta. And one thing that I thought was especially fascinating is that the best option for super damage when it comes to Rogue is not Tether. It's Dawn Chorus, Dawn Blade, and Star Eater Scales Arc Staff. If you see here, the total damage here, almost 3.5 million and 3.5 million. And if you scroll all the way to the bottom, I have extra charts. You can see very clearly, visually, that these are the top dogs by a decent margin. Glacial Quake and maybe some Tether Orpheus and Missile are actually just below it. Now, keeping in mind that Dawn Chorus maximum means you have to have multiple Dawn Blades on your team with Dawn Chorus, applying those burning effects, making it so that extra damage is very quick. And of course, Arc Staff with Starter Scales, meaning you have to have that ×8 buff, or at least a high buff amount of orbs. And lastly, I would also recommend that you keep in mind Solar, because we think that Solar 3.0 and the changes to subclass and the reorganization of this stuff is going to be affecting a lot of things. We're going to probably have more ability to use Sunspots, or a better combination with Blade Barrage. So keep in mind, a lot of these solar-based stuff you may not be using now, next season will become much better. So just keep that in mind. And as a last note, I just want to say something that is just makes no sense to me, is that things like Striker do damage like 28,000 or 21,000 with a light attack and a heavy attack, and Glacial Quake's light attack, which isn't written here, is like 48,000 damage, and its heavy attack is 140,000 damage on average. What's the point of using Striker? It doesn't last longer, it doesn't hit more enemies, and it's not in a better subclass. What's going on? And of course, again, these spreadsheets and these mega nerd sessions would not be possible without the cute animals that are on screen right now and my patrons on Patreon. See what I did there? You're brainwashed. You're looking at those cute animals. And now you want to go to my Patreon down in the description down below. Either way, that's going to be the end of it. Hope you guys did enjoy. My name's Dychronic, and I'll see you guys on the next one.